In this video, we're going to discuss the difference between errors and exceptions. So we've seen both of these terms, errors, exceptions. What do they both mean? Are they different? Well, that's what we're going to see here. So if you navigate to Python's official documentation, there's a section on errors and exceptions. This is actually in the Python tutorial. So I actually highly advise that you read through this document to get even more information about both errors and exceptions. So Python does make a distinction between the two. They are very closely related. And as you'll see, the word error actually appears in all of the exception names. So like you're going to see the name error, the key error, value error. These are actually all technically exceptions, but they have the word error in it. So the distinction really is just between syntax errors and everything else. So it's actually pretty simple. So a syntax error is the only category of error, and indentation error, which is just another type of syntax error, that is in fact just technically an error. So we saw with syntax errors, the major difference is that none of the code is actually run anywhere, even any of the lines that are written correctly. So with exceptions, that's not the case. All lines of code are run up into that exception. Now, so everything else, every other type of error is an exception. And an exception, for all exceptions, the syntax is actually valid. There's nothing wrong with the syntax. It can be executed, but there's just a problem with the execution. So we're going to see a lot of examples beginning with the name error below. But there are dozens of exceptions. With a syntax error, there's just the syntax error itself, then indentation error. There's one more called a tab error, but that is it. There's only just a version of a syntax error. There are literally dozens of exceptions that can happen for any number of reasons. So altogether, they're extremely closely related. Just that the syntax error doesn't execute, exceptions do execute everything up into where that problem lies. Okay, so one other thing about exceptions is that you can handle them. That means you can continue the program execution even if there is an error. So we will see that. And to make things maybe even more confusing, you'll hear the term error refer to both errors and exceptions. I will use it too, but as I've said now multiple times, the distinction really is between the syntax error and just everything else. So this term, it's just common to use just the word error or exception to refer to both errors and exceptions. So hopefully that won't be confusing because it's really just the syntax error versus everything else. Okay, one thing to know is that whenever an error happens, there will be a short message that is provided along with the error name. So it's important to read that message. That'll help you understand what has gone wrong, and it'll help you understand you better understand the issue. It'll also tell you which line the error is on. So lots of good things. So the error name along with the error message and the error line should help you understand how to fix the issue. All right, let's move on to our first exceptions. I have the part of the documentation that has all of the exceptions. These are built in, just like there's built-in functions and built-in types. These are built-in exceptions. You don't have to import them. These are all the exceptions that can happen during your program. There's a few dozen of them. So only a few of them happen in most programs. A lot of the other ones only in very specific instances. So we're just going to cover a few of the exceptions here, beginning with the name error. This is a common exception. So a name error occurs whenever a variable name is not yet defined. So take a look at this code block over here. I'm going to attempt to execute it. It assigns the value of 5 to A. Then it adds A and B together. B has not been defined anywhere. Then it attempts to then it has this line over here. This is actually not executed, this third line, because the error is right here. And if I look at the traceback, it'll actually point to the line. It says here is where the error is, A plus B. Name B is not defined. So Python uses the word name. This really is the same thing as variable name, but that's just a shortcut. So to be more descriptive, it could be variable name error, but that's just what Python uses, the word name. So B was not defined anywhere. We don't have B is assigned to anything. So this line cannot execute. The syntax is correct. There's nothing wrong with the syntax. If B was defined, then this would have worked and would have executed, but it is not defined. So that's where our error is. So if we look at A, this line of code did execute. So that's the difference between an exception and a syntax error, is that this line did execute. A plus B did not, and C did not execute because it came after the exception, after the line where the exception was. All right, now another piece of terminology I want to bring up is this term called raised. So this is just another term for whenever an exception is triggered, we use the term raised. So here we say the name error was raised, and or we raise, and in the future maybe we'll raise a particular error. That means we'll purposely create an error. But here Python raised the name error. Just think of it like it raised its hand and it said, hey, stop the program execution right here. There's an issue with your code. So you'll see this. This is a formal term. I'm going to use it for the rest of the course, and you'll see this in a lot in other writing. So raised just means to, that it was triggered, that it happened. So the Python raised the name error over here. All right, so that's a little bit more on errors versus exceptions and an introduction to our first exception, the name error.